But we have to dream, and we have to dream big. And dream is thinking outside the box and not looking at what was done before. And quite frankly, what was some of the stuff that was done before did not lead to good outcomes for our students.
This is Educating to be Human, and I'm your host, Lisa Petrides, founder of the Institute for the Study of Knowledge Management in Education. In each episode, I sit down with ordinary people creating extraordinary impact, people who are challenging notions of how we learn, why we learn, and who controls what we learn. Thank you very much for listening. Today on Educating to be Human, we dive into the heart of education that is truly rooted in the community with the president of one of California's great community colleges, Dr. Keith Curry, president of Compton College. His efforts to address the real-life challenges that students face are remarkable, and this includes meeting basic needs, such as food, housing, and textbooks, achieving academic success, and finding job opportunities after the completion of certificates and degrees. And his work is about designing for whole school transformation. So rather than relying just on specific, unique, or niche programs, instead is focused on creating a culture and structure that enables institutions to be accountable. That is, making sure leaders are able to deliver real outcomes for the communities they serve. We also talk about leadership in times of uncertainty. That is, how to lead in an environment of fluctuating budgets and federal and state policy shifts, and in a terrain that is shifting before our eyes. For Dr. Curry, equity isn't a slogan. It's about institutionalizing support systems, embedding change, and ensuring that student success isn't left to chance. Our conversation offers a glimpse into what it takes to build institutions that are both responsive and resilient. So, Keith, welcome.
Thank you for having me here today. I'm excited.
Yeah, me too, because the work that of community colleges is so mission critical. It has been for years, and even more so, I think, as the days and months and years go by. You've said before that you really see the untapped potential in your students and you support them fully no matter where they come from. And to me, that's really the mission of the community colleges. And so I just kind of want to ask you, what keeps you focused on this mission, and why do community colleges matter now more than ever?
That's a really good question. I've been at Compton College, or Compton Community College District, since August 15th, 2005. Previously, I worked at the University of California, Irvine. I was director of their early academic outreach program. I came here to Compton College as the dean or interim dean of student services. And I start with that because I really didn't know the mission of the community colleges when I first arrived. I was so focused on higher education and the four-year colleges, I didn't really know the impact community colleges has on the community. And having the community in your name is a big thing, right? And I didn't know. And so when I think about this question about the mission of community colleges and me involved in this work, I think about the students that we serve who are from the community that we serve. Me being from Compton, California, born and raised, and being from this community, I have a good sense of this community and the history of the community, but being able to interact with the students about this institution and what their goals are, it forces me to want to double down on all the work that we do. Because they're able to tell you about their story, successful or not successful, which gives you motivation to try to improve your organization to be better for all students. And so I like being able to interact with students and talk to students about their challenges and what they're faced with on a day-to-day at the college campus, but also off-site at their homes, just to understand how we can support them in order for them to be successful and complete their degree or certificate. And so the key for me is to be able to talk to students and having those conversations. Every day I make sure I walk to the cafeteria to talk to students to find out what's going on. And so they can put a face with the email, but really just trying to make sure I interact with students because they're the ones who give me the ideas. they're the ones who we do this work for, because we want to make sure that they don't have any barriers that impact their academic success.
I'd love to just sort of dive right into that piece about their academic success. We know today that there's some things that are in the way of student success, perhaps with some of our new mandates that we've seen nationally. Although I've also heard you talk a bit about diversity, equity, and inclusion (DEI), which of course is in a very strange space these days. I could say it has a bad name by some, but at the same time, I've heard you say that the DEI efforts, at least here as a state, that they haven't really changed the outcomes for Black and Brown students, and that there's certain data that is kind of revealing what we might say are uncomfortable truths. So I'd love to hear what you think about that, and what isn't working about how we in higher ed today talk about equity.
For me, over the last couple of years, I've always been a supporter of diversity, equity, inclusion, and accessibility. But also, I look at data, and so for me, it's about impact and success, and looking at our data disaggregated by race, gender, and also age, and trying to figure out ways to support all of our students, and looking at our systems as well. And so, I don't want to get too caught up in the conversation about DEI, DEIA, and what does diversity look like within our organizations. Let's talk about the data in regards to our student success and what we can do to support our students. So at our institution, one of the biggest struggles we have is really focus in on students completing transfer level English and math during their first year. And look at the data for our Black and also our Latinx students. Just so you know, our demographics, 64% of our students are Latinx or Latino, and 24% are Black/African American. And so our campus serves people of color based off our data. But our Black students and our Latinx students are struggling with transfer level English and math. For Black students, they're mostly taking transfer level English and math during their second year. So how do we, one, support students to make sure that they take it during their first year? But it's not just a responsibility on the English and counseling faculty to make sure they have it on their ed plan, and the English faculty teach the classes for transfer level English, and the math faculty teaching the transfer level math course. How to make sure the whole institution takes this on and really are talking about what's happening with our students. For example, so I look at our data all the time, and we're creating our new institutional set goals for our organization. And what we're doing with our institutional set goals, we're starting to look at disaggregation of data by program and also by department. And so I want to be able to look at, okay, what are we doing differently in our extended opportunity programs and services, EOPS program, that supports students in that program who are completing transfer level English and math. We have to make sure that the counselors are aware to make sure the students are all taking it during their first year and they're registering for it. But at the same time, we have to make sure that we have those supports for those students who are in EOPS who might need that extra tutoring or that support as relates to transfer level English and math, and make sure that they're aware of it. So what I'm getting at is that as an institution, we have to take it on, but we also have to be able, for EOPS and other programs, are able to see what does their data look like for their students completing transfer level English and math. And then also work with them on their annual plans of what it looks like, what support that they can provide, or what can they do differently to support their students. And that's where it start to look at the transformational leadership and transformational work. And I think this is the crux of higher education right now, is we have all these big ideas and big plans. How many people can operationalize those big ideas and plans? So we talk about transfer level English and math, we're talking about AB 705, AB 1705. And we're talking about, you take prerequisites. We're not really looking at co-requisites, but really looking at how do you institutionalize that law and put it down at the program level.
And could you tell us a little, I'm sorry to interrupt you, could you just talk a little bit about that law? Because so some listeners aren't necessarily going to know what those are.
So what AB 705 and 1705 was really focused on transfer level English and math to ensure that students have the opportunity to take transfer level English or math without having to take prerequisite courses for that and those basic skills courses. So students are able to pick transfer level classes during their first year without doing an assessment, right? Because previously students had to do assessment tests. Students would go into the assessment for transfer level English and math. For our campus, there was 4 classes that students would have to take, 4 classes below, in order to get to transfer level, right? If they start at the bottom. And so I can give you some data on that. We did a study a couple of years ago. Since you asked this other question, I got to say this, is that we had 200 students that we looked at who took transfer level math. Out of the 200 students, 4 of those students made it to transfer level math. They started 4 levels below, 4 made it to transfer level, and only 1 passed in math. I never forget that number.
Yep.
Right? So when we look at AB 1705 and 705, we have seen a number of students who are taking transfer level English and math increase. Right? But now we got to make sure the students are successful, but it should have been a whole lot more, right, during their first year. So AB 705 and 1705 is based off of work that was done at Long Beach City College regards to no prerequisites. Everyone has the opportunity to take transfer level, and it's a good thing, right? So our students, it's a barrier, but we have to make sure that the supports are there. But what I'm going at it with to another level is making sure that you institutionalize it, but also you set up accountability metrics within the different programs and departments. So we're all focused on this together, not just 1 or 2 areas on campus. Because in order for us to transform the entire institution, everybody has to do that. And so that's where I'm focused on right now as a leader. But it has taken several years for me to get to this point, but really trying to figure out ways to support our students through this transformation. So when I think about diversity, equity, inclusion, it's like, how do you move from DEIA and really focus in on impact and success? And you do that by transformation and really focus on the outcome, but transform your entire organization where your goals are all aligned. And AB 705, 1705 is an example of that, where you're able to look at it as a department level, but then also make sure your data is publicly available, disaggregated by race, age, and gender at the instructor level. So you're able to see how students are doing and have conversations about that, not used for evaluation, but more so used for conversation and program improvement, but really looking at the data and continue to let the data drive your practices at your institution.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more with that. And I guess as a leader who's trying to lead through transformation now, what's your experience? Are you able to get faculty and staff to engage with data in this way, not defensively, but as a tool for growth?
I think it's new for a lot of people, right? I think it's new, right? And here's the reason why I say it's new, is that I read an article, I think it was Estella Bitsimon was talking about racial equity. And, we're new practitioners, first generation practitioners as relates to racial equity and data. This is new for people. And we can't assume that conversation about data, people will not be defensive, because some people will, right? But we have to figure out ways as it relates to transformation. How do you guide people with that? And so for me now in my career, not only regards to setting goals for the institution at the program level, but also providing guidance for people. So when our division chair and also our deans are having conversations, we're giving them guidance for how to have those conversations. We're giving them professional development with Achieving a Dream and also our own professional development department to help support them as they lead these conversations. And why is this important? Because our institutional effective office can't go to every single department to lead these conversations, right? But we need to have everyone throughout the organization lead the conversation leaders, but it also makes sure we have the tools in their hand. And so one of the things we're working on this year for our Compton College 2035, which is our strategic master plan, is we're providing instructions for 12 months for leaders on campus as they lead. So if you're a division chair and a dean, we're giving you talking points for your division chair and dean meetings about a strategic plan, but also about the data. But also work with managers in student services about what this looks like. Work with managers in business affairs of what they look like. Because when you start talking about the data and also talk about strategic planning documents, if you don't see your name or your department in that document, you don't think it impacts you. And so one of the things I've been doing this last 4 or 5 months, I've been meeting with every single manager on the campus, talking about a strategic plan and talk about, okay, what do we need to do next year differently, but also ensure that they read the plan and also how they lead these conversations within their departments. But it's about whole school transformation.
Yes, I was just going to say that's exactly what it sounds like. You're talking about the whole college that's going through a transformation, not just one department or one program that's not performing well. You're really looking across the entire institution.
And the reason why this is important to me, in our strategic plan, Compton College 2035, one of my managers, I had a meeting this morning with one of my managers about this, and the manager said, Dr. Curry, what is your elevator pitch for 2035? I said, my elevator pitch. I said, It's transformation. This is called whole school transformation. So everything that we do from educational programs to staffing, technology, equity, it's all included, and facilities is all included. And it has one goal: accelerate student completion with a focus on equity and success. And the equity part is looking at our basic needs, right? Looking at our support that we provide students as relates to equity, and success is about their outcomes. But at the end of the day, we want to see more of our students complete their degree or certificate or whatever their goal is within a timely manner. So our goal is to accelerate their completion, but it's whole school. And we can't do that for 30 students. We can't do that for 60 students. How do we do that for the entire institution? And I think that's important for organizations as we move forward, is that our strategic planning documents have to be able to look at whole school transformation. And one of my biggest issues in higher ed is like, oh, you know what? We need a program for 30 or 60 students. Yeah, but that program for 30 or 60 students, those students will be successful. But the other 1,500 who might have qualified by that program don't get served, and they don't have a SAS on at graduation. But the 30, 60 has a SAS, and we're proud of those students. But the other students that we did not serve, some might participate in graduation, some might not. But we're not asked the question, why didn't they participate? So my sales pitch for 20, or my elevator pitch, is really looking at whole school transformation and for it to be a guide for other colleges across the country as relates to student success.
Well, in addition to whole college or whole school transformation, you're also talking about supporting students not just academically, but in every aspect of their lives, right? From housing to mental health to food access. So, what are you learning about how to support students, not just academically, but ultimately the goal is for them to have successful outcomes?
You know, that's a great question. And one of the things that I had just a reflection on basic needs. I've been involved in the basic needs movement for a long time. And when I think about basic needs, being a real college, really focusing on the basic needs of our students, is that, every other year there's a new basic need that people say we students are in need. But then also, how do you make sure that you institutionalize it where you're able to do that stuff long term? So at Compton College, every student received one meal per day from our every table cafeteria. And so we've been able to fund that for our students. So they have a one free meal per day, and they get $20 voucher every Wednesday at our farmers market. They also able to receive a Metro bus pass on our campus to be able to use the Metro bus pass within LA County. They also receive, we have a housing program that provides housing grants for short-term housing grants for our students. We're moving that forward with state dollars on that. We also provide students with, we have blue books, scantrons, and pencils available for students at our library for free, where they receive that service. We have a health center with St. John's where students are able to receive health services under a contract that we have with them. And we also have online services for mental health. I say that because there's so much more that we could do, right? So one is, how can you, one, identify those basic needs, making sure that you're able to offer to everybody, and then also making sure that you're funding it for a long-term period of time. And the reason why I bring up the long-term period of time, especially in this community, we're used to individuals saying, oh, we have this idea, this is great, we're doing it, but then when the money runs out, sorry, we had to stop. So people are used to, oh, we can get it now, but we might not have it long-term. And they go tell people about it. Hey, you know what, at Compton I get free food. And then somebody comes here 2-3 years down the road, no more free food. What happened? We're not following up. We're not keeping it together, right? And so when I think about the basic needs and also the success, is one, making sure that institutions provide the basic needs services for all students, and then two, make sure that you fund the basic needs services for a extended period of time so people know that those services are there and needed. And then the final piece of that is now also looking at what criteria we want to have in the future. So right now we have a one course. If you're enrolled in one course, you're able to receive services. And so we're going to be looking at, okay, the first year, if you're enrolled in one course, you can receive the services, as long as you complete transfer level English and math during that first year. Then the second year, what are the criteria to be able to receive those services? Because what I'm afraid of now is that we have students who are like, you know what, I'm not going to leave because I get everything here. And we talk about accelerated completion, you want to start looking at some criteria, especially during that second year. So during the first year, my goal is with the criteria, you get everything from one course, but you have to complete transfer level English and math. For our ESL students and non-credit, we got to figure out what that looks like. But then the second year, we have to make sure we have a criteria set in place so to continue the current student to complete. But that's something that we have learned from the data, right? And also learned from our students is that, they when they transfer or wherever they go, they look at Compton College supports. Like, I still want to be able to receive those same types of supports.
Well, I just have to ask you, right? You are leading an institution at a time when funding is unpredictable. There's policies that are shifting rapidly. You've described the basic needs of students. They're more complex than ever. What does this look like? What does transformational leadership look like when the ground is constantly shifting beneath you?
What it looks like one is you have to have leaders who are freedom dreamers. We have to continue to freedom dream and really look at what we can do for our students that's outside the box. In 2015, 16, we were dreaming about student housing. Right now, we're building student housing, 251 beds, $80.3 million. We're in week 31 of construction of this facility. But we have to dream, and we have to dream big. And dream is thinking outside the box and not looking at what was done before. And quite frankly, what was some of the stuff that was done before did not lead to good outcomes for our students. But really dream big. That's what it looks like is one, freedom dreaming. Two, budgets are statements of values. You have to know your budget. You have to know your budget over a 5-year period. And you have to be able to manage that budget. For example, understanding what your staffing budget looks like. Not only do I have a 5-year budget that includes people that were on grants and moving them to the district fund, but also look at your staffing over a 5 year. So you know what accounts people are being paid out of. So what I do for the budget is that we have a 5-year budget for the district. And we continue to monitor the 5-year budget and update the budget and understanding where positions are located and managing that, because that's important right now. My fear with the federal government right now and the Department of Education is funding and understanding, okay, if funds might be held, what does that mean? Understanding what the budget reconciliation bill will do to us, the big, beautiful bill, right? And what impact that will have on student loans for our students and how many students might not get loans and what that might look like. So really understanding what's happening federally is important, but then also what's happening nationally in regards to majors for our students as well. Because in Washington, D.C., and I meet with both sides, right? I meet with Republicans and Democrats when I'm in Washington, D.C., because I want to get an understanding and get a feel for what people are saying. But one thing I got from both sides, right, is about outcomes. So when you think about Compton College 2035 and acceleration of completion, that goes back into meetings we had federally. Because on both sides, people are talking about why is it taking so long for students to complete a degree? What are students doing with those degrees? Are they getting a job? What does apprenticeships look like? And so when I start thinking about the federal government, and your question is really understanding what your transformation look like, being able to freedom dream within your organization of what our system could look like for the student population that we serve, ensuring that our budgets are statements of values. And then what's critical is really having a good understanding of what's happening federally and understanding what those impacts could have on your transformation, what it could have on your freedom dream, what it could have on your budget, and then they'll be able to make those adjustments, right? And so for me, when I look at these adjustments, is being honest with ourselves of what we can and cannot do, but also sharing that information with your campus community. So I do a newsletter every week to the campus. And 2 weeks ago or prior, I did a update on the budget reconciliation bill and gave people information on that. So then people can start to see some of the changes we'll be making in our budget. I think right now, as leaders with the federal government, I think it's important that we have a reserve, because we're going to have to tap into our reserve if we're not able to receive some funding in a timely manner as we move forward. But really understand our budget, really understand our reserve, and ensuring that the programs and services that you offer don't stop. I don't want people to come on our campus and be like, because the federal government, we can't do this. No, students need us, and we have to make sure that these programs and services continue.
Yeah, I wanted to ask about that. I mean, with these concerns of future funding and federal support and the political will, like, what does resilience look like? Now, you've just kind of described it in that way, but what does it look like on the ground, right? When that actually happens and that funding isn't there for you, for your institution, and for your students?
So, what it looks like. I think leadership matters, right? And so I don't want our employees to have to worry about where I'm getting. I want them to have to worry about where they're getting paid, like their check, right? I want them to know that you're employed, and don't worry about what fund you're getting paid out of. I have that as my thought process. So having that, I'm able to make adjustments if I have to move someone from a different budget to another budget, right? So the work will continue, but the funding source might look different. But I don't want the employees to have to worry about what their funding source looks like. And so to me, that's important. I think a lot of people can be concerned regards to these cuts and what's happening and what the impact could be on their job and their employment. And so I'm trying to alleviate that by being able to move people around but also looking at foundations to be able to get some funding support, but tying that work to Compton 2035. So what it looks like is having a strategic plan that outlines where you're going as an organization. Understand that strategic plan is your transformational document. Understand that your strategic plan has a lot of freedom dreams that are included. Our freedom dreams, student housing is included in there. Having fruits and vegetables, bearing trees and stuff on our campus is included in our plan. We passed a $200 million facilities bond to support the facilities needs on our campus, setting aside money to support our technology needs on our campus and moving things forward, but really letting that document guide you as your transformation. And so when you're on the ground level, that document guiding you is going to be helped. You could articulate to the campus community and to the community at large what you're doing in support of your students, because everything is included in your strategic plan. And then at the ground level, you're setting institutional set goals for your organization. So I talked earlier about transfer level English and math. So for our campus, we have an institutional set goal that was approved by the Board of Trustees at their board meeting in June as relates to the percentage of students who want to see complete transfer level English and math by 2035. Mm-hmm. Then taking those goals that we have for our institutional set goals, creating that for each of the programs, academic departments, and also divisions, so people know what that looks like for where they're at, for their areas, and figuring out how they can change that. And then the last part of this transformational piece is really looking at that return on investment, looking at what happens with our students once they leave our institution, and then they get the return on their investment. And so I'm really focusing on that right now. And so we're making updates to our institutional set goal to really look at the return on investment, because people are looking at, is it worth it for me to go to a community college versus going straight to work? And we have to be able to articulate to our constituents and our current students of why this is important.
When I think about the community college system here in California, I think a lot of people don't really understand about its role. And I'd love just sort of a final question to ask you, what do you want people to understand about the role of community colleges in building a more just future? It's not just in California, but certainly here in California. And the second piece of that is, do you have a call to action for other educational leaders right now, both here in California in our community college system, as well as outside of California?
I have a couple. So first, community colleges are local. They're in our local area. They're part of the community. And I think it's important that we don't forget that and we stay connected to our community and also work with our local governing boards as we try to figure this all out, but really making sure that the community is a part of that and opening your campus up to the community so they can see the programs and services you have, but they know that they're a part of it. And that's why I love special events on your campuses, because people are able to see what you're doing at your college to get people on campus as much as possible. And I think that's critical, especially when you're building new facilities, right? I was walking to campus today. We have $160 million worth of construction happening right now. $160 million. But at the same time, we got to make sure people in the community know that there's $160 million worth of construction happening. And some of the money that's being paid for this is coming from our local bonds. But to continue to say this is a community college and the construction work that we're doing on campus, it happened because of you, the community, because you supported 2 bonds, actually 3 bonds, in total of $400 million since 2002. And so being able to talk about the community as we do this work, I think is important, but also supporting our local governing boards as it relates to this work and being able to share the data, especially as it relates to return on investment, because people want that question that's out there is like, is it really worth it? And we have to be able to articulate that in a different way. And I think that's going to be one of our biggest challenges is that elevator pitch about why is community college important. I see it. I see the stories of our students. I see it. I have experienced it over the last 20 years. But we have to make sure that we're all able to see it and articulate it and why it's important. My call to action, I have a couple. One is for education leaders to not give up in this work right now. We all have to work together. Sometimes we might not agree on decisions that are made at a campus or at a state level that impacts our students and their success. But right now, we have to all be in line that student completion is our number one goal. not only as a state, but also as a nation. But then using that student completion and link it to transfer, and then also to get a job with livable wages, and ensuring that we're offering apprenticeships, internships, and job opportunities for all students across guided pathways. And what I mean by that is that by every major, everyone has the opportunity to have apprenticeships, internships, and job opportunities at a community college, not just in career technical education. And what does that look like? Because that's whole school transformation again, right? But really, that's the call to action, is the outcomes, to really be focused on outcomes of our students and really looking at how do we connect our students to that next step before they leave us, regards to employment or to transfer, and really be intentional with that. At Compton College, when I think about transfer, we're looking at transfer from 50-mile radius. We used to do a bus trip. We used to do a trip to historically black colleges and universities. We're not doing that no more because our students are going to colleges within a 50-mile radius. So all of our funding is going to be focused on that. And I'm also meeting with every single college within a 50-mile radius because we're strategizing a plan to really focus on transfer for our local students. Now, when you think about the call to action, is that. But then I also think it's important for foundations and funders to really be thinking about, how do you support leadership? Because at the end of the day, leadership matters. I get reports all the time from different foundations, different groups, telling us what we should be doing. No disrespect. I know these people. I support these people. I do. But if you're telling me that we need to do more apprenticeships, internships, and all the other stuff in your report, how do you operationalize that? And I think funders should be funding colleges to be able to operationalize this work. Because it's not as easy as, you get a report, this is what we need to do, or this is what the state wants us to do. We have to figure out how do you operationalize it within our own local area. And so I'm really focused on that as a college leader, of how do you focus in on the outcomes, but also how do you look at the transformation on your campus, and how do you support leaders doing the work? I don't think there's enough support for leaders. I don't. And I'm not saying just the president is the leader. I'm also talking about board of trustees as well. I'm talking about academic senate leaders. I'm talking about union leaders as well. We have to be able to provide support to be able to do this transformational work. And it's not easy, especially when you're looking at whole school transformation.
Yeah, thank you. And you're talking about whole school transformation, but in fact, you're talking about the community, right? Because it starts at the school, it goes out to the community, it goes out to the transfer universities. And isn't that part of the original master plan for education in California, was that these things really would be linked in this way, supporting our communities? So thank you very much for really sort of taking us on that journey of how at the center is Compton College, but what you're really doing is extending out into the broader community, because that's where the students and our communities are ultimately going to be successful, sustainable, and resilient. Before we finish, I always like to leave space for one final question, something I ask all my guests. Can you make up the title of the book that you wish more people would read?
If I'm able to pick a book or to create a book for right now, these times, I would say we need an unapologetic leadership book for leaders. Mm-hmm. And how can we think unapologetically about this work, but also how do we operationalize this work unapologetically?
So what's the title of the book?
It'd be Unapologetic Leadership.
Keith, thank you so much for joining us today and for centering the role of community colleges with both a clear vision and a deep commitment to equity. Your work reminds us that institutional change is possible when leaders stay grounded in the needs of their communities while still dreaming big. Thank you. Thank you, everybody, for listening to the show this week. This has been Lisa Petrides with Educating to be Human. If you enjoy our show, please rate and review us on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you listen to your podcasts. You can access our show notes for links and information on our guests, and don't forget to follow us on Instagram, Blue Sky, at edu2behuman. That is EDU to be human. This podcast was created by Lisa Petrides and produced by Eleni Theros. Educating to be Human is recorded by Nathan Sherman and edited by Ty Mayer, with music by Orestes Kaletsos.